Beneath the quiet shimmer of the Mediterranean, where sunlight bends and dances across blue depths, there once lived a civilization that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the sea itself. Long before the great empires of Greece and Rome rose to dominance, before the stories of gods and heroes filled the air of ancient cities, there was Crete, an island floating gently between continents, touched by the calm winds of the Aegean and the whispers of forgotten time. Upon its soft hills and olive-covered slopes, the Minoans built a world of remarkable peace and quiet beauty. Today their name lingers like a distant echo, known to a few, remembered by even fewer. And yet, in their forgotten stillness, they left behind a story that hums softly beneath the noise of history. Imagine standing at the edge of the Cretan coast as the evening light fades. The sea stretches endlessly, its surface mirroring the calm of the sky. The waves roll in, slow and deliberate, touching the shore with the same patience that shaped centuries. In that sound, the low, steady rhythm of water, lies the memory of a people who once thrived here. The Minoans lived in harmony with this sea, not fighting against it, not conquering it, but listening to it. Their civilization grew like coral, quietly, beautifully, layer upon layer, unseen until one looks closely. Archaeologists and historians often describe them as Europe's first great civilization, but such a title feels too grand, too loud for what the Minoans truly were. They were not defined by conquest or war. They built no great armies to expand their reach. Their story was one of connection, between people and nature, between island and ocean, between art and daily life. In every surviving fragment of pottery, in every painted dolphin, in every curving wall of their palaces, there is an absence of violence and a presence of calm. It is as though their society was designed not to dominate the world, but to exist peacefully within it. Yet time, as it often does, moved forward without mercy. The Minoans, like the sea foam that glows one moment and fades the next, were eventually lost to the tides of history. For centuries their name vanished. Their palaces sank into the earth, their art was buried under layers of soil and silence. Only in the early 20th century did explorers and archaeologists begin to uncover what had been hidden, a world once vibrant with color, now coated in dust and mystery. When the first walls of Knossos were unearthed, it was as if the island itself exhaled a secret it had held for thousands of years. But what makes their story so mesmerizing, even in its quietness, is not merely what they built or traded or painted. It is the feeling of serenity that surrounds every trace of them. Their ruins do not shout of power, they whisper of balance. Their frescoes do not glorify kings, they celebrate nature, life and motion. In the soft lines of their art, one can almost feel the rhythm of the waves that shape their existence. To listen to the story of the Minoans is to slow down, to drift into the pace of an older world, where time was measured not by conquest, but by the seasons of the sea. Tonight, as you listen, imagine the island as it once was. The scent of wild thyme in the air, the hum of bees among olive branches, the soft laughter of children echoing from stone courtyards. Traders loading ships with jars of oil and wine, artisans carving intricate seals in the golden afternoon light. And far off, beyond the horizon, the faint glow of other lands calling, Egypt, Cyprus, Anatolia, linked to Crete by quiet trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean. It was a world that moved not with haste, but with grace, guided by the gentle hands of people who understood that to live well was to live simply, in rhythm with the natural world. And so begins our calm journey, not through the drama of wars or the rise and fall of kings, but through the soft and steady story of a civilization that thrived on peace. A story that invites us to listen rather than to chase, to drift rather than to rush. The Minoans may be gone, but their world remains beneath the waves and within the silence. A civilization that, in its quiet perfection, still dreams beneath the sea. Before there was history, before names and empires carved themselves into the stones of time, there was the island of Crete, an emerald jewel resting upon the calm surface of the Mediterranean. Even now, it feels almost otherworldly, as though time itself hesitates there. Its coastline curves gently, like a sleeping figure beneath a blanket of golden light. The sea laps softly against limestone cliffs, while inland the air carries the scent of herbs, rosemary, thyme and sage, growing wild beneath the sun. In the far distance, mountains rise not in menace but in majesty, their peaks dusted with snow even as olive groves bloom below. It was here, between mountain and sea, that the Minoans built their world, a place where nature shaped the rhythm of life. Crete's position in the heart of the Mediterranean gave it a rare gift. It was isolated enough to protect, yet connected enough to trade. The island became a crossroads between continents, a meeting place of ideas, goods, and stories. Sailors from Egypt, traders from Anatolia, travelers from the distant Greek mainland, all found safe harbor in its calm bays. Over time, these exchanges wove Crete into a soft tapestry of culture and craft, each thread colored by the people who passed through. Yet despite the constant movement of ships and goods, the island itself remained tranquil, its pace unhurried, its people attuned to the slow turning of the seasons rather than the ticking of conquest. To understand the serenity of the Minoans, one must first feel the serenity of their land. The soil, rich and red, offered abundance: wheat that shimmered in the wind, grapes that ripened under endless summer, olives that dripped with golden oil. Springs bubbled through the limestone, feeding groves and valleys. The climate was gentle, neither cruelly hot nor bitterly cold. Life here did not need to fight for survival, it only needed to flow. Nature's generosity shaped the character of its people. Where other ancient societies built fortresses, the Cretans built courtyards. Where others glorified kings, the Minoans glorified the sea, the harvest, and the art of living well. From the first light of dawn, the island would awaken slowly. Farmers walked the paths between terraces, fishermen pushed small boats into the silver-blue water, and shepherds led their flocks up into the hills. The sounds of the day were soft: the splash of oars, the whisper of the wind through tall grass, the rhythmic beating of pestles and clay bowls. It was a world without urgency. The pace of life followed nature's breath, and that calm rhythm seeped into the soul of its people. Even the architecture of the island seemed to mimic the landscape: smooth curves, open spaces, light streaming gently through narrow windows. The Minoans believed that balance was the foundation of harmony. To them, beauty was not found in grand displays of power but in the quiet perfection of proportion and flow. Their connection to the land was sacred. The hills provided clay for their pottery, the forests offered timber for their ships, the sea gave them fish and the means to explore. In return, they built their homes and temples not to dominate the land but to belong to it. The walls of their palaces carried the colors of the island itself: ochre, red, and blue, shades drawn from the very earth and water that surrounded them. To walk through ancient Crete was to move through a living reflection of nature's palette. Travelers who later visited Crete described it as a place that seemed suspended between worlds, neither wholly human nor entirely divine. The island possessed a stillness that inspired myth. They said that Zeus himself was born in a Cretan cave, nurtured by the milk of a goat and the songs of nymphs. Whether myth or memory, the story reflected the same truth that shaped Minoan life: that the divine was not distant but present, woven through the fabric of the world. Every breeze, every wave, every olive branch carried a hint of something eternal. It is easy to see how such an environment could nurture a civilization unlike any other. The Minoans did not rise from hardship or struggle, they rose from abundance and peace. Their creativity was not a reaction to chaos, but an extension of harmony. Surrounded by beauty, they learned to express it, through art, through architecture, through ritual. Their world was a mirror of their island: gentle, fluid, endlessly alive. Crete, in its stillness, taught them how to build a society that valued balance over battle, grace over grandeur, and presence over power. As the sun set behind the western hills, the island would glow softly, bathed in a warm, golden haze. The sea, now calm and deep blue, would whisper against the shore. Somewhere, a potter would finish shaping a vessel, a child would chase the last light across a courtyard, and the first stars would appear above the mountains. It was a world where everything had its time, its place, its rhythm. And in that rhythm, the story of the Minoans began, not with conquest or invention, but with the quiet heartbeat of an island surrounded by calm waters. When the first Minoans began to shape their homes and villages across the gentle hills of Crete, the world was still young in its understanding of civilization. There were no towering monuments yet, no empires echoing with the noise of armies. Theirs was a dawn marked by quiet beginnings, people learning to live together, to trade, to build, and to dream. The sea provided both protection and possibility, and from its shimmering surface came not fear, but connection. The Minoans, in their earliest days, became explorers of peace rather than of conquest, weaving a network of exchange that stretched from the Nile to the coast of Anatolia. In the calm rhythm of their trade, a culture began to take shape, one defined not by war or walls, but by artistry, community, and a deep trust in the sea that surrounded them. These early settlers were skilled farmers and seafarers. Their hands worked the red soil, coaxing from it olives, barley, and grapes. Their boats, crafted from the cedar and cypress of the island's forests, carried them beyond the horizon. When the wind filled their sails, it did not lead them to battle but to new friendships and new ideas. Every journey brought back not only goods, copper from Cyprus, ivory from Egypt, fine cloth from the East, but also stories, myths and influences that enriched the soul of the island. In their ports, the Minoans learned that the world was vast and full of life, and that beauty could be found not in control but in connection. As the centuries passed, the small farming communities of Crete began to grow. Villages became towns, and towns began to pulse with the gentle rhythm of trade and creation. The Minoans developed writing, a series of graceful symbols carved into clay tablets, to record their transactions and rituals. Though we still cannot fully read their language, the very form of it speaks softly of sophistication and care. It is a language that looks like art, as if even their words were meant to flow rather than to command. This was a civilization that saw no divide between function and beauty, between labor and art. Everything they touched, from pottery to architecture, seemed to breathe the same quiet devotion to balance. It was during this long dawn that the first palaces began to rise. They were not the harsh fortresses seen elsewhere in the ancient world, but open, airy spaces filled with light and color. The Minoans did not fear invasion. They did not build for war. Instead, they built for gathering, for trade, for ceremony. The palace became the heart of the community, a place where artisans, priests, traders and farmers could come together under the same open sky. The architecture reflected their worldview: stairways that led nowhere in particular, corridors that wound like rivers, courtyards open to the breeze. Life did not move in straight lines, it moved in spirals, in patterns, in cycles, much like the sea that defined them. In this early age, the Minoans began to distinguish themselves from other ancient peoples. Their art tells the story: scenes of nature, of dolphins and lilies, of flowing lines and bright colors. There are no depictions of kings towering above their subjects, no carvings of warriors or prisoners. Instead, we see dancers, acrobats and ceremonies of joy. The Minoans saw beauty in the ordinary and sacredness in the natural. They were a civilization that seemed to understand that life itself, in all its quiet moments, was worthy of reverence. Their society was guided not by fear but by cooperation. Evidence suggests that women played a central role, as priestesses, leaders and symbols of fertility and life. The feminine presence, both human and divine, was deeply woven into the structure of their culture. Statues of the mother goddess, with her arms raised in grace, appear again and again in their art. She was not a figure of domination but of nurture, the embodiment of balance and creation. The Minoans worshipped not distant gods in the heavens, but living forces in the earth and sea around them. Each mountain, each spring, each grove was alive with spirit. Their religion was not a hierarchy, it was harmony. As their confidence grew, so too did their reach. The Minoan ships became a familiar sight across the Mediterranean. They traded olive oil, fine pottery and precious stones, leaving behind traces of their culture wherever they went. Yet despite their expanding influence, the heart of Minoan life remained calm and centered. Crete continued to be their sanctuary, their cradle of peace. The sea that connected them to the world also protected them from it, wrapping the island in a gentle blue embrace. It is remarkable to imagine how such a civilization flourished so early, long before the might of Greece or Rome. While others built their strength upon conquest, the Minoans built theirs upon creativity, trade, and shared prosperity. They proved that greatness did not require violence, that a society could thrive through the simple practice of balance. Their dawn was not lit by fire or ambition but by sunlight, by the rhythm of waves, by the laughter that filled their courtyards. And so, in the stillness of those early centuries, the Minoans became something extraordinary, a peaceful people in a turbulent world. Their story is a gentle reminder that civilization does not always begin with struggle. Sometimes, it begins with calm. It begins with the decision to build rather than to break, to listen rather than to conquer, to live in harmony with the earth and sea that cradle us all. The dawn of the Minoans was not only the birth of a culture, it was the awakening of a way of life that, even thousands of years later, feels like a dream the world once had and slowly forgot. If Crete was the heart of the Minoan world, then Knossos was its pulse, a living labyrinth of color, art, and gentle motion. The palace of Knossos was not a fortress of power, nor a monument of kingship. It was a breathing city within walls, open to the sky, filled with the sounds of daily life and the fragrance of wildflowers carried in from the hills. To walk its corridors would have been to step into a harmony of stone and sunlight. There were no high towers to guard against enemies, no iron gates or armed guards. Instead, there were open courtyards, bright frescoes, and hallways that turned softly like flowing rivers. In its quiet design, Knossos reflected the Minoan spirit, a civilization that believed beauty could be a form of peace. From above, the palace seemed to spread like a mosaic across the landscape. Over 1,000 rooms wound around one another, layered with staircases and terraces. Its walls, painted with vivid scenes of dolphins, lilies and dancers, told the story of a people deeply in love with life itself. Light wells channeled the sun deep into the heart of the structure, and open-air corridors allowed the breeze to drift through like music. Every space, from the grand central court to the smallest chamber, seemed crafted not just for function but for feeling. The Minoans understood space as something alive, a gentle rhythm of openness and shadow, of cool stone and warm air. To live in Knossos was to live within a painting, where architecture and nature flowed into one another without boundary. At the center of the palace, life unfolded with quiet elegance. Traders arrived with amphorae filled with oil and wine, their voices echoing softly through the courtyards. Artisans shaped clay and bronze in workshops, their hands stained with color and dust. Musicians played lyres and flutes as offerings were made in shrines dedicated to the mother goddess. The palace was not merely a seat of administration, it was a living organism, a hub of trade, religion, art, and community. Its rooms stored the goods of an entire island, but they also preserved its dreams, its rituals, and its rhythms. Knossos was less a kingdom than a heart, one that beat in time with the waves of the surrounding sea. The most striking feature of Knossos was its art. Every wall seemed to tell a story without words. Frescoes of marine life, dolphins leaping, fish gliding through blue water, spoke of the people's deep connection to the sea. Scenes of festivals, dancers and bull leapers filled the rooms with motion, as if the walls themselves were alive with movement. Even the borders of the frescoes curved like waves or vines, as though the Minoans could not bear to imprison their art in straight lines. They painted not for power but for joy. Their art was not a record of conquests but a celebration of being. Each color, each brushstroke seemed to breathe, gentle, free and alive. Perhaps the most mysterious part of the palace was its labyrinthine design. Corridors branched and turned, leading to chambers upon chambers, creating a feeling both intimate and endless. Later generations, unable to comprehend its complexity, imagined it as the mythical labyrinth of the Minotaur, a place of darkness and danger. But in truth, Knossos was not a place of fear, it was a place of wonder. Its complexity reflected the natural flow of Minoan life, circular, nonlinear, filled with patterns and layers like the rings of a tree. The legend of the labyrinth may have been born not from terror, but from awe at the palace's endless pathways and light-filled chambers. The life within Knossos was marked by ritual and celebration. Ceremonies were held in courtyards where dancers moved in rhythm to music, their movements graceful and deliberate, echoing the patterns of waves. Offerings were made not to distant gods but to symbols of life and renewal, the bull, the double axe, the sacred tree. These rituals were not solemn or harsh, they were communal, filled with music, fragrance, and color. The people of Knossos did not separate the sacred from the ordinary. To them, the divine was woven into every action, in the shaping of clay, the pouring of wine, the lighting of lamps at dusk. Their religion was not about dominance or obedience but about gratitude for the balance that sustained them. As evening fell over Knossos, the palace would transform. Lamps flickered in niches along the walls, casting soft light across painted dolphins and lilies. The air grew cooler, filled with the murmur of distant music and the scent of burning oil. Traders and priests, artists and servants, all moved with an unspoken rhythm, each gesture reflecting the order and grace that defined their world. The palace at night was not silent but serene, humming with the low, steady heartbeat of communal life. It was not a place of kings ruling subjects, but of people sharing space, work, and purpose. In the end, Knossos stood as more than just a palace. It was a philosophy made of stone. It represented a belief that beauty could guide a society more gently than power, that structure could flow like music, and that peace could be designed into the very walls where people lived. The Minoans built Knossos not to impress the heavens, but to reflect them, to create a living harmony between the human and the divine. Standing there today, among its ruins and restored frescoes, one can almost hear the faint echo of footsteps in sunlit corridors, the laughter of artisans and the distant crash of waves. The palace life of Knossos remains, even in its silence, a whisper of what it means to build not for eternity but for peace. Morning in ancient Crete began not with urgency, but with quiet continuity. The first light of dawn spilled across the hills and terraces, and the sound of soft footsteps echoed through stone courtyards. There was no thunder of armies or shout of commands, only the calm rhythm of people beginning another day in harmony with the land and sea. In the small towns and villages beyond Knossos, the Minoans lived simple yet deeply ordered lives. Each day unfolded gently, like the turning of the tide, and each person played a role in the great unspoken balance that sustained their civilization. To live as a Minoan was to move in rhythm, with the seasons, with the winds, with the gentle breath of the earth itself. Farmers were among the first to rise. Before the sun fully warmed the horizon, they were already at work among the olive trees and vineyards. The scent of soil and crushed leaves filled the air. Fields of barley shimmered faintly in the morning light, and the hum of bees drifted through the valleys. Farming was not just labor, it was devotion, an act of partnership with nature. The Minoans believed that the fertility of the earth depended on their respect for it. They tilled the land not as masters but as caretakers. The olives they gathered would become oil, used not only for cooking but also for lighting lamps, anointing bodies and offering to the gods. Each act of harvest was both practical and sacred, tied to the rhythm of gratitude that marked Minoan life. In the towns, artisans began their day in workshops where clay, metal and color came together in quiet artistry. Potters shaped vessels on spinning wheels, their movements steady and meditative. Painters traced lines of blue and red across the smooth surfaces, turning each piece into something alive. Bronze workers hammered tools and ornaments with deliberate grace, and weavers sat before looms, drawing threads into intricate patterns. The Minoans valued the beauty of craft, not for luxury but for harmony. Everything they made, a cup, a jar, a seal, carried a touch of care, as if even the smallest object should hold a fragment of peace. Their designs, full of spirals and waves, seemed to echo the movements of water and wind, mirroring the world they lived in. Women played a central role in daily life, moving with quiet authority through homes and markets. They prepared meals, managed households and participated in rituals that connected family to community. The hearth was the heart of every dwelling, a small, glowing center of warmth and togetherness. Children learned by watching, absorbing the crafts, customs and rhythms of their parents. Festivals were communal, and when they came, the entire town gathered in song and dance. Life was not divided by strict hierarchies, it flowed in shared experience. Even the spaces where people lived reflected this balance. Open courtyards where neighbors could meet, shaded walkways that encouraged conversation, terraces that overlooked the sea. The Minoans seemed to understand that peace begins in the design of daily life. In the bustling ports, traders prepared their ships for journeys across the Mediterranean. Amphorae were loaded with oil, wine and pottery, goods bound for distant lands. The docks echoed with low voices, the flapping of sails, the creak of wood against rope. Yet even here, amid the movement of commerce, there was calm. Trade for the Minoans was not conquest in disguise, it was connection. They exchanged not just goods but ideas, stories and art. Their ships carried a spirit of curiosity rather than ambition. And when the sailors returned home weeks later, their arrival was met with joy, not the spoils of war but the return of community. Evenings in Minoan Crete were gentle and unhurried. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden light across the island, families gathered together. The smell of bread baked in clay ovens filled the air, mingling with the scent of olive oil and herbs. Meals were shared outdoors under open skies, while laughter and conversation floated through the warm air. Lamps were lit with the oil of the same olives picked months before, their flickering glow reflecting off painted walls. In these quiet hours, life slowed into stillness. The Minoans, who had spent their day in work and trade and art, ended it in the same way they began, in peace. Religion and ritual flowed seamlessly into the rhythm of life. Shrines stood not only in temples but in homes and fields. Offerings of flowers, fruit and small figurines were left for the gods, or perhaps more truly for nature itself. The Minoans did not worship out of fear but out of respect for the living world. Their ceremonies were full of movement, song and joy, acts of thanksgiving rather than supplication. Even in their beliefs they mirrored the cycle of nature: birth, growth, decay, renewal. Life to them was circular, endlessly flowing, endlessly returning. As night settled, the sea reflected the stars and the island grew quiet. The only sounds were the gentle rustle of wind through olive trees and the distant call of waves against the shore. The people of Crete slept without fear, surrounded by the rhythm of the land that sustained them. In their dreams, perhaps, they heard the same steady pulse that had guided them all day, the heartbeat of the island, the whisper of the sea. The Minoans lived their lives as part of a greater harmony, a melody composed by nature itself. To glimpse their world is to be reminded that peace is not the absence of activity, but the presence of rhythm, the kind of rhythm that hums softly beneath the surface of time, steady as the tide, eternal as the dawn. If one were to wander through the halls of Knossos or the smaller palaces scattered across Crete, the first thing to notice would not be the structure itself but the color. Every wall, every surface seemed to breathe with painted life. Dolphins leapt across blue waters, lilies swayed beneath soft skies, and birds hovered above flowering fields. The Minoans filled their world with images that spoke not of war or conquest, but of harmony and celebration. In their art, they revealed the essence of who they were, a people devoted to peace, beauty, and the quiet rhythm of existence. To study Minoan art is to step into a conversation between humanity and nature, one that whispers instead of shouts, one that feels eternal in its gentleness. Unlike the art of later civilizations where rulers and soldiers dominated stone and canvas, Minoan art avoided hierarchy. There were no depictions of great battles, no glorified images of kings towering over the people. Instead, their frescoes celebrated movement, color, and the interconnectedness of all living things. They painted fish and flowers, dancers and bull leapers, women gathering saffron and processions filled with calm faces. Even in their rituals there was grace rather than fear. The figures they drew seemed to float, light, fluid, free from tension. The walls of their palaces became living murals that spoke of joy and continuity, rather than power or control. The materials the Minoans used were as natural as their inspirations. Earth pigments, crushed minerals, and plant dyes gave their art its soft vibrancy. The blue of the sea came from powdered lapis or azurite, the reds from ochre and iron, the whites from lime. Their brushes were made from reeds and animal hair, their plaster smoothed with sand and water. Every color had life, and every stroke seemed guided by calm patience. These were not works created to intimidate or overwhelm, they were created to soothe, to reflect the beauty that already surrounded them. Even when depicting movement, a leaping figure, a flying bird, a curling wave, the Minoan artist conveyed serenity. There was energy but never chaos. Their pottery followed the same philosophy. Minoan vessels were not rigid or severe, they curved like waves, flowing from base to rim with elegant symmetry. The kamars were known for its delicate, painted patterns, shimmered with abstract designs that captured the rhythm of nature, spirals of shells, patterns of leaves, and the soft glide of marine life. Later, the marine-style pottery emerged, covered in octopuses whose tentacles stretched playfully across the surface, as though embracing the entire vessel. Each piece was both art and utility, crafted to hold the essentials of life, water, wine, oil, and to remind the user of the beauty in everyday function. The Minoans seemed to believe that even the simplest act, like pouring wine or lighting a lamp, should take place in the presence of beauty. It is often said that art reveals the soul of a people, and the Minoan soul was luminous. Their artistic expression lacked the darkness of conquest or the rigidity of fear. They were surrounded by the sea, and the sea shaped their vision, vast, deep, and ever-changing yet endlessly calm. Their frescoes of dolphins were not just decoration, they were expressions of gratitude toward the element that sustained them. The fish, the flowers, the flowing lines, all pointed to a worldview that placed life, not death, at the center of existence. Their art was not a record of victories, but a meditation on continuity. Even their religious imagery carried this softness. The goddesses they worshipped were portrayed with open arms, holding snakes or standing among animals, symbols of renewal and fertility. These figures were not stern or distant. They exuded compassion and power that nurtured rather than destroyed. Altars were decorated with lilies and double axes, symbols of creation and balance. Their sacred spaces, often set in nature itself, a cave, a grove, a mountain peak, were chosen not to separate them from the world but to merge them with it. Their rituals, as depicted in art, show people dancing, not kneeling in fear. The divine, to the Minoans, was not above them, it was within the beauty of life itself. Even their architecture reflected an artist's eye. The flowing design of their palaces, the curved staircases, the interplay of light and shadow, all of it seemed composed as a visual harmony. The walls were not barriers but canvases, and the courtyards were open to the sky like living paintings. The Minoans saw the world not as something to control, but as something to participate in, to echo in their creations. Their art did not impose order on nature, it mirrored it. Every design, every line, every hue was an act of remembrance. A reminder that life is both fleeting and eternal, structured yet fluid, delicate yet enduring. To the modern eye, Minoan art may appear simple, but its simplicity is deceptive. Beneath each line lies an entire philosophy, that peace can be expressed through beauty, and that beauty can be a language of peace. The absence of war scenes does not suggest naivety, It suggests choice, a deliberate decision to turn away from the noise of violence and toward the calm of coexistence. Their artists were not chroniclers of kings but keepers of balance, translating the quiet pulse of their island into form and color. As night descended upon Knossos, the frescoes would have glowed faintly in the lamplight, the blues deepening, the reds softening into gold. The figures on the walls seemed to move with the flicker of flame, dancers continuing their eternal motion, dolphins leaping forever through imagined seas. To stand there was to feel a kind of peace that transcended time, a calm that spoke from one age to another. The Minoans, through their art, left behind not just images, but a message, that civilization need not roar to be great, that beauty can be stronger than fear, and that peace, when lived and created with care, can leave a mark as enduring as stone. The Minoans lived in a world where the sacred and the ordinary were inseparable, where every hill, every spring and every olive grove could hold the presence of the divine. Their myths were not written to frighten or to dominate, they were stories that explained the rhythm of life and the mystery of nature. Among the most enduring symbols of Minoan culture was the mother goddess, a figure who embodied fertility, balance and the nurturing power of creation. Statues of her, arms raised in blessing, appear repeatedly in Minoan art, a quiet reminder that life for these people was sacred in all its forms. She was not a distant deity demanding fear and obedience, but a presence woven into the patterns of daily life, a gentle guide who existed in the flowering fields, the flowing rivers and the calm seas. Bull leaping, one of the most famous Minoan rituals, provides a glimpse into their philosophy of balance and courage. Far from being a spectacle of violence, it was an act of rhythm, coordination and communal celebration. Young men and women, trained from childhood, would grasp the horns of a bull and vault gracefully over its back, a dance of trust between human and beast. Artists captured this practice in frescoes, showing the fluidity of motion, the grace of the participants, and the harmonious relationship between humans and animals. The ritual was not about dominance over nature, it was a symbolic conversation with it. It was a reminder that life required courage, agility, and respect, but also that these acts could be beautiful, measured, and communal rather than destructive. Ceremony and ritual extended beyond the palace walls. Sacred caves, mountain peaks, and groves served as open-air temples, connecting the Minoans to the natural world around them. Offerings of fruit, flowers, and small figurines were made in gratitude, not in fear. Festivals were communal gatherings where music, dance, and shared meals created a rhythm of social and spiritual harmony. Priests and priestesses acted as guides rather than rulers, facilitating connection between people and nature. Their role was to maintain balance, to ensure that the pulse of the community resonated with the pulse of the island itself. In this way, religion was woven seamlessly into everyday life, a quiet, continuous thread that tied the sacred to the practical. The myths that grew from Minoan culture later inspired Greek stories that became widely known across the world. The legend of the Minotaur, for example, may have its roots in the elaborate architecture of Knossos and the bull rituals that took place there. Over time, these stories transformed, gaining drama and darkness as they moved into later cultures. But in their original form, they were more likely celebrations of courage, skill, and harmony with nature than tales of fear and imprisonment. The labyrinth, often imagined as a place of terror, was in the minds of the Minoans a network of connection. Pathways linking homes, workshops, and sacred spaces, reflecting the flow and interweaving of life itself. Minoan art, ritual, and myth all convey a sense of fluidity and movement. Figures in frescoes do not stand stiffly, they dance, leap, and glide with a natural grace. Animals are depicted in motion, sometimes interacting with humans, sometimes existing in their own elegant balance. The colors chosen, reds, blues, ochres, are soft yet vivid, capturing the light of the Aegean and the warmth of the island. Through these images, one can feel the quiet joy and reverence with which the Minoans approached life. Their world was structured, but it was never rigid. It was rhythmic, alive, and continuously renewing itself. The Minoan spiritual life also emphasized the importance of women, not only as participants but as central figures of authority and reverence. Priestesses played key roles in rituals and ceremonies, embodying the life-giving principles of the goddess. Women were depicted in art as strong, active, and central to communal life. This emphasis on feminine power reflected the values of balance and nurture that permeated every aspect of Minoan society. Their reverence for women, for nature, and for the cyclical patterns of life created a culture that prized care and continuity over conquest and domination. Even in the quiet of their daily routines, the presence of ritual and myth shaped Minoan life. Meals, crafts, and trade were infused with awareness of the divine. The simple act of planting seeds, harvesting olives, or shaping clay could be a gesture of reverence. Music, song, and movement reinforced connection within the community and with the world around them. Every action was a part of a larger pattern, a living meditation on the balance between humans, nature, and spirit. In this way, the Minoans created a civilization that celebrated life in its totality, from birth to harvest, from work to ritual, and from the land to the sea. To understand the Minoans is to understand a society that lived within the embrace of myth and ritual without fear or chaos. Their stories were gentle teachers, their ceremonies acts of harmony, and their art a reflection of the sacred pulse that ran through their island home. In every fresco, every figurine, and every whispered tale, the Minoans left behind a reminder that civilization can be defined not by power, but by balance, not by conquest but by care. Their myths and rituals echo softly across the centuries, inviting us to listen, to feel, and to remember the quiet strength that comes from living in harmony with the world around us. The Minoans were defined not only by their art and rituals but also by their relationship with the sea. Crete, surrounded on all sides by the calm, shimmering waters of the Mediterranean, offered both protection and opportunity. While other civilizations were tied closely to their land, the Minoans embraced the horizon, building ships that could carry them beyond the familiar coastline to distant lands. They were not conquerors, nor were they intent on domination. They were traders, explorers of connection, and interpreters of the gentle pulse of the ocean. Their vessels glided across waves with grace, carrying not only goods but also ideas, culture, and subtle influence that spread quietly from island to island. From the ports of Knossos and Phaistos, small fleets would set sail, loaded with jars of olive oil, wine, honey, and finely crafted pottery. These were not weapons of war but offerings of exchange, meant to cultivate ties rather than fear. The sea routes stretched to Egypt, Cyprus, Anatolia, and beyond, allowing the Minoans to form a network of peaceful commerce that few other civilizations could rival. Ships bobbed gently in harbors, their sails catching the wind as sailors navigated using the stars and the sun, listening always to the rhythm of the waves. Trade was a dialogue, not a conquest. Every journey was an opportunity to connect, learn, and share. Their skill in navigation was remarkable. Minoan sailors observed the currents, the changing colors of the sea, the flight of birds, and the patterns of the stars. They understood that patience and observation were more valuable than speed or force. The sea was a partner, not an enemy, and this philosophy shaped their success. While other civilizations feared the ocean's unpredictability, the Minoans moved with it, allowing the tides and winds to guide them with a rhythm that mirrored their lives on land. Their calm approach turned every voyage into a meditation, each journey a reflection of the interconnectedness of their world. The goods they carried were reflections of Crete itself. Olive oil, thick and golden, preserved both nourishment and warmth. Pottery painted with dolphins and lilies carried a piece of their aesthetic across the waters, reminding distant shores of the beauty and balance of Minoan life. Fine cloths, jewelry, and copper artifacts traveled along with these vessels, each item a small message, a whisper of a civilization that valued harmony over power. Trade created not only wealth but understanding, allowing the Minoans to cultivate relationships with distant peoples who shared their appreciation for art, ritual, and the rhythm of daily life. Even in their commerce, rituals and offerings were present. Ships were blessed before departure, sometimes with small sacrifices or tokens left to ensure safe passage. Music, song, and prayer accompanied the departure of fleets, blending the practical with the sacred. The act of trading became not a matter of profit alone, but a continuation of the Minoans' reverence for balance. Every journey respected the harmony between human effort and the forces of nature, between giving and receiving, between departure and return. Ports themselves were spaces of calm activity rather than chaotic bustle. Sailors unloaded amphorae carefully, merchants exchanged goods with polite negotiation, and craftsmen repaired nets and rigging. The rhythm of work followed the patterns of the tides. Even the design of the harbor facilitated this flow. Open spaces allowed for the movement of people and goods, while the shoreline provided gentle protection from storms. Observers from other civilizations were often struck not by the Minoans' wealth but by the peaceful organization of their trade, a silent testament to their philosophy of life. The sea also brought stories, myths, and inspirations from distant lands. Minoan artisans incorporated motifs seen in Egypt or the Levant into their pottery, blending foreign patterns with local traditions. Songs and dances carried the memory of journeys across the waves, while tales of distant lands inspired festivals and ceremonies back home. In this way, the Mediterranean itself became part of the Minoan cultural canvas, a living, breathing map of influence and exchange, painted not with conquest but with calm exploration and creativity. By trusting the rhythm of the sea, the Minoans created an economy that was sustainable, expansive, and deeply integrated into their way of life. Their trade routes were arteries of peace and connection, allowing Crete to flourish without the violence that shaped so many other early civilizations. Each voyage reflected their philosophy. Life is best navigated with care, observation, and respect for forces greater than oneself. And as the sun set over the harbor and lamps flickered in the evening breeze, the ships rested quietly, moored in the calm waters they had learned to read so well. Through these voyages, the Minoans reached beyond the horizon while remaining rooted in the rhythm of their home, a civilization defined by grace, balance, and the enduring whisper of the Mediterranean. Despite their prosperity and harmony, the Minoans were not immune to the forces of nature and fate. For centuries they thrived on Crete, their palaces and ports bustling with art, trade, and ritual. Yet slowly, quietly, the island began to experience the subtle tremors of change. Earthquakes, volcanic activity, and shifting climates tested the resilience of the society they had built so carefully. Knossos, the heart of their civilization, would have felt the tremors through its walls, the delicate frescoes quivering as the island moved beneath them. These natural events were not catastrophic in isolation, but their repetition over generations created challenges that even the Minoans' calm wisdom could not fully control. The eruption of Thera, a volcanic island to the north, may have sent waves of ash, fire, and panic across the Aegean. Seas swelled in response and trade routes were disrupted. Crops could have failed, the skies darkened with volcanic dust, and the gentle rhythm of daily life was interrupted by the unpredictable force of the natural world. For a civilization so attuned to balance, such events were profound tests. The Minoans, who had learned to read the waves and skies, faced a reality that exceeded the boundaries of their knowledge and control. It was a reminder that even the most harmonious societies are fragile when confronted with the raw power of nature. Archaeological evidence suggests that the palaces of Crete were rebuilt multiple times, reflecting both resilience and the strain of repeated disasters. Stone and plaster show repairs, corridors were strengthened, and walls repainted, as if the Minoans refused to surrender to instability. Yet with each rebuilding, the subtle decline of their influence becomes apparent. While the island remained a hub of art and trade, connections to distant civilizations began to weaken. Trading partners may have sought other harbors, and the flow of ideas and goods that had sustained Minoan creativity slowed. Their world, once gently expanding with the rhythm of peace, began to encounter the friction of disruption. Some historians suggest that foreign invasions may have contributed to the decline, though evidence remains sparse. Unlike the war-driven empires around them, the Minoans lacked extensive fortifications. Their strength lay in connection, not conquest. As other civilizations grew aggressive, the islanders' philosophy of calm and balance may have made them vulnerable. The combination of natural disasters and potential external pressures slowly eroded the society that had once thrived so effortlessly. The vibrant palaces and bustling ports, once full of color and sound, began to see less movement, quieter corridors, and fewer festive gatherings. Yet even in decline, the Minoans' influence persisted. Artifacts and frescoes continued to inspire, their techniques and styles appearing in neighboring civilizations. The echo of their culture spread across the Mediterranean like a gentle current, leaving traces of harmony and beauty behind even as the heart of the civilization faltered. Though Knossos and other palaces eventually fell into ruin, the ideas and aesthetics nurtured there did not disappear entirely. The Minoan legacy became part of the fabric of human history, influencing Mycenaean Greece and beyond, a whisper of calm in a world increasingly defined by conflict and conquest. The decline also reminds us of the fragility of peace. The Minoans had built a civilization rooted in balance, art, and connection, yet no philosophy can entirely shield against the unpredictability of life. Their story is not one of failure but of the delicate interplay between human ingenuity and natural forces. Even as their palaces crumbled and their frescoes faded under layers of dust, they left behind a message: that civilization can flourish quietly, that beauty and rhythm can define a society, and that even in the face of decline, the echoes of harmony can resonate across time. By the time the palaces were abandoned, the island was quieter, the corridors empty, and the colors of the frescoes dulled by age. Yet beneath the silence, the pulse of the Minoans remained. Their art, trade, and ritual continued to inspire, a soft reminder that even civilizations lost to history can leave traces of calm and balance. The decline of the Minoans is not a story of sudden destruction, but a gradual fading, a civilization slipping into the shadows while leaving behind the gentle lessons of a world built on rhythm, beauty, and harmony. In remembering them, we are invited to listen closely, to feel the pulse of an island long gone, and to understand that even in loss, the quiet legacy of peace can endure. Though the palaces of Crete have long since crumbled and the bustling ports are now silent, the legacy of the Minoans continues to ripple across time, whispering through the arts, architecture, and myths of the civilizations that followed. Their influence can be traced in the Mycenaean culture, whose palaces borrowed architectural designs and ceremonial practices from Crete, though often framed in a more martial and hierarchical way. Even the Greeks, who would later dominate the Mediterranean, inherited fragments of Minoan mythology, tales of labyrinths, bull-leaping, and goddesses whose presence shaped the lives of mortals. What the Minoans left behind was not conquest or written empire, but a subtler gift, a philosophy of living in harmony with the land, the sea, and the rhythms of daily existence. Minoan art, with its flowing lines, marine motifs, and celebration of movement, became a reference point for generations of craftsmen and artists. Pottery decorated with spirals and octopuses inspired the Mycenaean marine style, while frescoes of dancers and ritual scenes influenced the visual storytelling of Greek culture. The sophistication of Minoan design, the combination of functionality and elegance, served as a silent teacher, demonstrating that utility and beauty need not exist in opposition. Even today, archaeologists and historians are struck by the soft complexity of their creations, which convey a sense of motion, balance, and calm, as if the objects themselves could breathe and pulse with life. Religion and ritual too carried forward echoes of Minoan belief. The reverence for feminine power and the mother goddess persisted in various forms throughout the Aegean. Myths of creation, fertility, and the interplay between humans and the divine trace their roots back to Crete, reflecting an understanding that the sacred was part of everyday life, woven into work, art, and communal gatherings. This subtle approach to spirituality, emphasizing harmony, gratitude, and respect rather than fear and punishment, set a tone for the cultures that followed, leaving behind a gentle imprint on the Mediterranean worldview. Trade practices also reflect the Minoans' quiet influence. Their model of peaceful exchange, built upon observation, skill, and relationship rather than conquest, shaped the economic patterns of neighboring islands and coastal settlements. Crete's network of maritime connections allowed goods, ideas, and artistic techniques to flow freely, and even after the civilization itself began to fade, the patterns they established endured. The Mediterranean became a space not only of commerce but of shared culture, where civilizations could grow interconnected without the constant shadow of conflict. In this sense, the Minoans were pioneers of cultural diplomacy, teaching that prosperity can arise from connection and cooperation. Perhaps most enduring of all is the idea that life can be lived with balance, rhythm, and beauty at its center. Walking through the ruins of Knossos, it is easy to feel the echoes of a society that valued harmony over dominance, creativity over conquest, and observation over aggression. Their philosophy was subtle, embedded in every staircase, fresco, and vessel, a reminder that human life, when aligned with nature and each other, can be a work of art in itself. Even in their decline, this lesson survived, carried forward by the cultures they touched and the stories they inspired. The Minoans teach us that the measure of a civilization is not only in monuments or armies, but in the quality of life it fosters. Their homes, palaces, and cities were designed to reflect balance. Their art expressed joy and connection. Their religion emphasized gratitude and respect for natural cycles. They did not seek immortality through domination, but through the lasting harmony of their creations. As we examine the traces of their world, we see not the rubble of collapse, but the enduring whispers of a people who understood the quiet power of living well, with rhythm, beauty, and peace as guiding principles. In reflecting on their story, we are invited to consider the same lessons in our own lives. The Minoans remind us that strength is not always loud, and influence is not always achieved through force. Calm, observation, creativity, and connection can leave marks that outlast empires. Though thousands of years have passed since the last festival in Knossos or the final voyage of a Minoan ship, their legacy remains alive in the principles they embodied. A civilization whose gentle approach to life continues to offer guidance, inspiration, and a sense of serenity to all who pause to listen. To think of the Minoans is to imagine a civilization that thrived not through war or dominance, but through subtlety, beauty, and harmony with the natural world. They inhabited Crete, an island embraced by the Mediterranean, where the rhythm of life was dictated not by conquests but by the cycle of seasons, the rise and fall of the sun, and the gentle motion of the sea. In this world, human life was intertwined with nature and with the spiritual, each influencing the other in a continuous, quiet dialogue. Unlike other ancient civilizations whose legacies are measured in the grandeur of fortresses or the terror of armies, the Minoans left a different kind of footprint, one of rhythm, grace, and calm sophistication. Their influence, subtle yet enduring, invites us to reconsider what makes a civilization meaningful and timeless. At the heart of the Minoan experience was the seamless integration of daily life and spirituality. Unlike societies that compartmentalized work and ritual, the Minoans viewed all activity, from farming to pottery making, from cooking to trading, as opportunities for connection and reverence. Fields of barley and olive groves were cultivated not merely for sustenance, but with a consciousness that every seed planted was part of a larger cycle of life. Farmers rose with the sun, feeling the dew on the earth, and worked in harmony with the rhythms of the soil. There was patience in their labor, and even routine activities carried a quiet sanctity. Harvesting olives or tending to vines was not just work. It was an act of respect, gratitude, and attentiveness. Every gesture, no matter how small, contributed to the delicate balance of their society. Artisans, too, lived within this same philosophy. The workshops of Crete were spaces of creation where everyday objects were elevated into works of beauty. Pottery was painted with dolphins, octopuses, lilies, and spirals, not merely for decoration, but as an extension of the Minoans' understanding of life and movement. Bronze tools and ornaments were shaped with care, reflecting a belief that even the smallest creation could carry meaning. Art, in the Minoan sense, was not a pursuit of vanity or status. It was a medium for cultivating peace, expressing joy, and embedding harmony into the very fabric of life. Each vessel, each fresco, and each carved figure told a story of connection, between humans, between people and nature, and between the temporal and the eternal. Religion and ritual were also intertwined with daily life, reinforcing the sense that all existence was sacred. The Minoans worshipped a variety of deities, with particular reverence for the mother goddess, who symbolized fertility, creation, and balance. Shrines could be found not only within the grand palaces but also in fields, caves, and mountain groves, places where humans could connect with the divine in their immediate environment. Offerings of flowers, fruit, and small figurines were made with gratitude rather than fear. Festivals were occasions to celebrate life itself, the changing seasons, the bounty of the land, the achievements of the community. Music, dance, and communal feasting were integral to these celebrations, blending joy with devotion in a manner that feels intimate even across millennia. Through these practices, the Minoans communicated that spirituality was not a distant abstraction but a living, breathing part of everyday existence. The architecture of Minoan civilization further reflects this philosophy. Palaces such as Knossos and Phaistos were open, labyrinthine structures that encouraged fluid movement, interaction, and reflection. Corridors meandered gently, staircases rose in elegant curves, and courtyards invited communal gatherings. The palaces were not fortified to intimidate, but designed to harmonize with their environment and support social cohesion. Light wells channeled sunlight deep into interiors, and open-air spaces allowed breezes to flow freely through rooms. Frescoes adorned walls with scenes of dancing figures, animals in motion, and marine life, turning spaces into living artworks. Even the placement of rooms reflected a deep understanding of human psychology, spaces that encouraged reflection, collaboration, and serenity. The palaces themselves became a manifestation of the Minoan worldview, that human life, nature, and art could coexist in rhythm and balance. Trade and interaction with other cultures reinforced and extended the Minoans' gentle influence. Crete was a hub of maritime commerce, with ships carrying olive oil, wine, pottery, and other goods to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Aegean islands. Trade was conducted not through force or intimidation but through skill, observation, and the careful cultivation of relationships. Sailors learned the rhythms of the sea, navigating by the stars, the currents, and the wind. Ports and marketplaces, though bustling with activity, were organized spaces that reflected the Minoan sense of order and calm. In exchanging goods, they exchanged culture, ideas, and aesthetics, embedding their philosophy of peaceful prosperity into the broader Mediterranean world. Their influence spread quietly yet powerfully, affecting neighboring civilizations without ever resorting to conquest. Yet even as we admire the sophistication of Minoan life, their story is also one of fragility. Natural disasters such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions tested the resilience of their society, disrupting trade and challenging the stability of palaces and communities. The eruption of Thera, for example, may have cast ash over Crete, darkening skies, affecting crops, and unsettling the rhythms that defined Minoan life. Over time, these forces, combined with potential pressures from neighboring civilizations, contributed to the decline of a society that had once flourished in balance. Their palaces were repaired and rebuilt multiple times, reflecting determination and resilience, but eventually, the repeated stress eroded the foundations of their civilization. Yet even in decline, the lessons of their philosophy, of beauty, rhythm, and balance, endured, echoing through the Mycenaeans and beyond. The Minoans' legacy is not only measured in artifacts and ruins but in the philosophy they embodied. They remind us that civilization is not solely the accumulation of wealth or the expansion of territory, but the cultivation of harmony, creativity, and respect for life. Their palaces, art, rituals, and trade practices all express a commitment to living well, to creating beauty, and to fostering connection. In a world often dominated by conflict, their example provides a counter-narrative, a demonstration that societies can thrive through observation, care, and the mindful cultivation of daily life. The Minoans show that enduring influence is not always about conquest or power, but about subtlety, rhythm, and the quiet embedding of values into every aspect of existence. Reflecting on the Minoans also invites introspection about the present. In their lives, we see the importance of integrating work, art, spirituality, and community, of creating spaces that nurture connection rather than isolation, and of approaching the natural world with respect and attentiveness. Their civilization, though lost to time, leaves behind a philosophy that transcends the millennia, a meditation on how to live in harmony with oneself, one's community, and the environment. Every fresco, artifact, and ruin is a testament to this worldview, a whisper across the ages reminding us that peace and beauty can be central to human experience. Even the stories passed down from Minoan culture, filtered through Greek mythology, carry fragments of this philosophy. The labyrinth, the minotaur, and the tales of goddesses may have become dramatic over time, but their origins lie in a society that valued skill, courage, and balance rather than terror and punishment. Bull leaping, sacred processions, and ritual dance were expressions of human and natural harmony, repeated across generations to maintain the rhythm of life. The myths are not only entertainment, they are remnants of a worldview where human action is integrated with cosmic order, where courage is paired with reverence, and where life itself is a dance rather than a conquest. In contemplating the Minoans, one is struck by the idea that influence can be gentle yet profound. Though their palaces have fallen into ruin, their art has faded, and their daily lives are known only through archaeology, the essence of their civilization persists. It survives in the philosophies of neighboring cultures, in the aesthetics of art and architecture, and in the subtle understanding that human life can be guided by balance, creativity, and respect for the rhythms of nature. Their story encourages patience, observation, and a recognition that the quiet cultivation of harmony can leave a legacy more enduring than conquest or power. Ultimately, the Minoans offer a reflection on what it means to live thoughtfully. Their civilization teaches us that the strength of a society lies not only in its monuments but in the integration of life, art, and belief. They show that beauty, rhythm, and mindfulness are not luxuries but foundations for enduring influence. And as we walk among the ruins of Knossos, imagine the frescoes dancing in lamplight, or consider the gentle rise and fall of the Mediterranean waves that guided their sailors. We are invited to feel the pulse of a people who understood the profound value of calm, observation, and connection. In their lost civilization, we glimpse a model for living that is timeless, offering lessons in peace, balance, and the subtle power of a life well harmonized with the world around it. The story of the Minoans, expanded and fully considered, stretches far beyond the physical remains on Crete. It is a story of rhythm and order, of art and ritual, of trade and communication, all bound together by a philosophy that privileged calm over chaos, beauty over violence, and harmony over domination. They remind us that civilizations need not roar to be remembered. Some leave echoes not through conquest but through the quiet pulse of life itself. Their legacy endures as an invitation to observe carefully, act with care, create with beauty, and live in a rhythm that honors the world around us. The Minoans, though lost to history as a political power, remain a profound lesson in the gentle art of civilization.